Hey everyone, it's me, John. Welcome to another episode of Itchy Mysteries. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Before we start today's episode, I want to give a quick thank you to the channel Peter Vlogs. Peter is a vlogger. He's doing every day for a year, and in the middle of one of his vlogs, he basically did a review of this show. A review about me reviewing other things, which I thought was really cool. I really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate him sharing that with his audience. Quick shout out also to Tracy Lynn for letting me know about that and kind of getting us connected. It's been very cool chatting a little bit with Peter. And if you want to see his channel, I've got a link down below. Or if you want to see the vlog where he talks about Itchy Mysteries, there's a link in the description box below where you can check both of those things out. All right, now to business at hand. Today we are looking into a film called The Jeffrey Dahmer Files. Now, occasionally, I'll start one of these reviews and I'll say, this title really isn't quite great for this film, or it doesn't fit this film for some reason. This movie certainly has that same problem. I have to say, when I first saw The Jeffrey Dahmer Files as a title, the type of expectations I had about it were kind of like an investigation. You're talking about a file, so they're going to go into I was figuring into the whole case and really get a lot of detail out about that case. That's really not what happens here. And what this film really is 3 interviews with people that were affected primarily around the time of his arrest. Now, on IMDB, the synopsis on it kind of alludes to that a little bit as well. Let me read that to you real quick. An experimental documentary that uses archival footage, interviews, and fictionalized scenarios to tell the story of the people around Jeffrey Dahmer during the summer of his arrest in 1991. And that synopsis really nails it. This documentary, the way I view it in particular, is specifically about his arrest, goes into a little bit of the aftermath of that, but primarily, most of the time, you're going to be hearing about that day and the following day and what happened around that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I honestly think that is a pretty cool focus to have for a film like this, but it might have been better to call it, The Capture of Jeffrey Dahmer or something like that. Just in terms of setting expectations with your audience, I felt when I was watching this documentary that it was coming up a bit short on a true investigation of all of what the horrible things that Jeffrey Dahmer did, which might not be a bad thing necessarily. I also have to question, that synopsis mentions that they use archival footage. They do, but not a whole lot. For the balance, most of this film is 3 people being interviewed. Let me tell you who they are real quick. You basically have a medical examiner. You have the police officer that was interrogating Jeffrey and getting the confession out of him, or the first many confessions out of him, I guess we should say, as well as a neighbor that had interacted with him and lived next door or in the same building as him. So those are your 3 primary sources of information. Great interviews and a lot of very captivating information that comes out of these people. I think that is certainly the strong suit of this film. On the flip side, like I said, the archival footage is like this much. There's really not a whole lot of archival footage in here. The fictionalized scenarios, and I think the reason why this synopsis calls this an experimental documentary, the fictionalized scenarios are a bit distracting. They seem to stop the narrative at certain places. Imagine one of those news shows that you watch, or basically anything on investigation discovery. You know how you'll have someone that is being interviewed and they're talking, and then they'll show scenes kind of over them talking that they've recreated of what happened, or the crime scene and things like that. And you know how those scenes really don't have very good dialogue? Okay, now imagine you're seeing those scenes, but there is no narration over it, and you're supposed to pay attention to that really bad dialogue. That's essentially what happens in this film at several points. There was even one point where I was watching the movie and I thought the video froze, because literally for, I would guess, it felt like 30 seconds, but I know that's not right. It was probably somewhere from 10 to 15 seconds. You are staring at a hallway in a hotel and nothing is happening. There's no one else in the shot. Someone walks out of the shot kind of at the start, and you're literally just staring at this blank hallway. There's no narration going on. I don't even think there's music going on at that point. It was really, really odd. It's a little bit jarring. Now, I think what happened with the production on this is you have the director is also the editor of this film, and his name is Chris James Thompson. I took a look at his IMDb. It looks like most of his work is actually in the sound area of production, but he has had, I think, 5 directing credits now. I really think the editing is where this thing could have been tightened up quite a bit. Now, unfortunately, this film is only, I believe, an hour and 20 minutes or so. And I think if you would have had an editor that was really keeping focus, trimming out those parts that really don't add a lot to the story contextually, and quite honestly, even some of those fictionalized scenes have nothing to do with the story. Like they're literally scenes of him going to an eye doctor or getting a new prescription, going to a liquor store, drinking beer in random places. I mean, they literally do nothing to add to the context or to move the story forward. So if you really had a tight editor on all that, I really think that there's probably a good 15, maybe even to 20 minutes that would just get chopped right out of this thing and could have really turned it into a lean and mean 1-hour documentary specifically on the capture of Jeffrey Dahmer. The star in this is really the cop. He really has the best information because he spent the most time with Jeffrey Dahmer at this time frame that they're talking about in this film. And in a weird way, he gets plenty of talk time, but the film doesn't necessarily focus on him. And I think if they would have focused on him a little more, it could have really beefed up some dramatic elements of this film. I mean, he's got a really interesting story. He basically, because of his dedication to this case, blows a marriage, finds himself in a really dark place, and they're just kind of talked about as talking points where I think they really could have delved into that a little bit more. Perhaps they could have found a 4th person to interview to add more if they really wanted to push this over the 1-hour mark or to get it to feature length, which I think was a focus of the director, and maybe to in a way that actually affected the product badly. Because I'm telling you, there are so many scenes you're watching that are always those fictionalized scenes where you're like, what the heck am I watching right now? What does this have to do? And why is this acting is not great. The dialogue is terrible. It feels like it's someone that is, it kind of felt like a high school project at certain times with those particular scenes. And then all of a sudden it throws you into this really deep, disturbing, very good information firsthand from people that were interacting with him directly. It's a real mixed bag on that. Now, outside of all that, this film did go to a few film festivals. It did get nominated a few times, so I just have to put that out there. However, when I was done watching it, I felt pretty confident in my rating. I gave it a 6.5. I looked at IMDb after that, and it is currently rating as a 6.4 on there, so I'm pretty much lined up with IMDb. I saw some of the other ratings, Metacritic and all that. It's basically hovering around a 6 to a 6.5 at most of those places, which I think is unfortunate. I think this really could have been an 8, a solid 8, if, like I said, the title was really leading your audience to understand what the topic actually was. If they took that topic and fleshed it out just a little bit more and maybe followed some of those talking points that I mentioned, like with the cop, his marriage breaking up and all that, there could have been some interesting dramatic things that came out of further questions on those topics that really didn't come out in this documentary. Admittedly, it wants to be about Jeffrey Dahmer, so I think that's a bit of a debatable point if you really want to go into those other topics for these other people. But if they were affected by him in that way, it still is about him. So I think that they could have done that in kind of a cool way where the people that were around during the capture of Jeffrey Dahmer were affected. And they certainly were. You have his neighbor basically being displaced, being terrorized, not able to sleep at night, having to drink herself to sleep, having to deal with addiction problems. There was a lot of fallout that just turns into these little 1-sentence things that happen in an interview. And I don't know if the interviewer just was sticking to a script or didn't ask the right follow-up questions to go into those topics a little more deeply. If they did, it wound up on the cutting room floor, and I think that's a shame, because I think the humanity in this film is those people, and to have those types of large life issues boiled down to just a sentence or two, I don't know if that's the best. But overall, if you're interested in this case at all, I think you really want to hear those interviews, so I would suggest checking it out. Know that you're going to be in for these fictionalized scenes of very questionable quality. I would say like a third of those fictionalized scenes seem to work okay, and then 2/3 of them just were odd, didn't really fit in. Like all of a sudden you're watching this scene and you're like, why do I care that he went to get prescription glasses? Like what does this have to do? They weren't talking about that. After the scene's over, they don't talk about that. You're literally just watching this actor that's acting like he's Jeffrey Dahmer going about his day. Would have been okay for, B-roll, for something to run over the dialogue of other people, and there was plenty of opportunities for that, but that's not how they use it in this film. So it's a little strange, guys, but I do think it's worth kind of slogging through those moments to get to the good information that's in this, and I do think there's a lot of good info in it. Outside of that, I think it was shot pretty well. Some of those fictionalized scenes, like I said, they seem a little bit like a high school production, or maybe I should say college, not be so insulting. Some of them are shot a little better than others, but all of them just have this quality of feeling kind of cheap. But the actual talking heads footage all looks great. The archival footage that does show up is used appropriately. I actually have to give it kind of a thumbs up for music, and that's not normal in these documentaries for me. I was kind of digging the music, particularly at the start and at the end. I thought it was pretty fitting, and it was just good music choices. But outside of all that, there's a little value here, particularly if you're interested in the case, or if you know nothing about the case. I think it's also a good primer to get you kind of into some of the terror that this man was responsible for. So you can find it. I watched it on Hulu, and I'm a Hulu subscriber, so there was no charge for me on that. I'll have a link to Hulu in the description box below, so you can check it out if you also subscribe there. You can also rent it, but I do know it's also available on a few channels on YouTube, so you might want to search for it. I gotta be honest, if I would have rented it for $4, I probably would have been a little disappointed at the end of it. If I would have rented it for $1.99, I think it probably would be fair at that price. But from what I see, it looks like on Amazon, $4 is the price for the standard def version. So I think that might be a little sharp, because this movie has a bit too much filler in it. It's really a solid hour and then 20 minutes of other stuff that just really has very little value. All right, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Itchy Mysteries. Remember, 6.5 on the Jeffrey Dahmer files, which really should have been called The Capture of Jeffrey Dahmer. I don't know why they missed on the title so hard, but they really did. Thank you for hanging out with me, everyone. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you again right back here on the Lord and Arts channel.